Welcome to the Educators Among Us podcast, where we share motivational messages and inspiring stories for and about educators. Your host, Scott Barron, is author of the critically acclaimed book, Love 'Em and Lead 'Em, and provides powerful insights and wisdom for those who heed the call to teach, coach, lead, and serve at all levels of education.
This is Scott Barron, and I'm honored to be your host for the Educators Among Us podcast. This is a program that is specifically designed for those who serve in all levels of education, because you have the guts to be in the mix. You have the courage to fight back, to fight through, to carry on, even though everything around you may be telling you, just give up, just stop. Let it go, right? But we have a passion for this work, and it requires that. Those who answer the call to be educators, you got to know you didn't sign up for an easy job. This is something that requires a tenacity, a persistence that we're glad that you're obviously here because you've got that, and you want to be a part of the education community that's not given up, that believes in people and wants to be their absolute best. And as a part of our journey together, we share a lot of weekly encouragements for educators. Of course, every Monday morning we send out the email, and that goes out to 40, 50,000 subscribers around the world. And we get to speak into the lives of educators in North America and in Asia and Africa and South America, all over the world. And it's a real privilege. And so as a part of this journey together, we often get to talk to people who are also involved in other types of education. And we get to kind of share about their story and how they got into this and what they're doing to make a difference, both in terms of elevating the quality of schools, but also of easing the journey for educators. And this today, we get to speak to Courtney Williams, who is a very talented gentleman I've known from working together on the board at the School of Education at Johns Hopkins University. And but Courtney, we share a similar goal. I love this the T-shirts that the Torch team had, where it said "Lighten the load," ease the lift. Right. And so as I was looking at some of the material that's out there. And so that's what I love about Courtney and his team is he's the CEO of Torsch. He's been involved in education leadership and strategy for many, many years. And he's a good friend. And so I wanted you to know a little bit about Courtney so that he could speak into some of the lives of the educators that are part of this program and maybe could give you another perspective, because he comes at this. We have really different backgrounds and experiences. And so, Courtney, I've been really excited about having this conversation together. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Scott. It's a pleasure to be here as we get towards the holidays. It's always nice to sort of pull back from work a little bit, spend some time talking to other colleagues, and share some of the things that we've learned in this journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So we kind of start off these conversations with a really personal way of getting to know you some. And so would love to have you for just a moment describe who was an educator that significantly impacted your life and why?
I've thought about this question before, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a non-traditional answer. Now, obviously, having gone through, elementary, middle, high, college, getting an advanced degree, I've had lots and lots and lots of teachers. And so I could probably find one or two that have been incredibly impactful. In fact, I could probably find many that have been very impactful in my life. But for this answer, I tend to choose someone a lot closer to home. I pick my grandmother, who is not a traditional educator in that she wasn't trained as an educator. She wasn't an official teacher. But like everybody else, we tend to learn a lot at home. We tend to learn a lot from our parents, family members, and we don't think of them as educators, but they very much are. And, there are a number of things that when times get hard and the road gets rough that I fall back on. And I learned those things from my grandmother. One of the things my grandmother used to say that I always remember when things get tough is if everybody likes you, you're doing something wrong, right? And it is a life lesson that I've taken with me for years. And you should say this to me as a kid, and I didn't really know what it meant until I sort of got older. And so she is, in fact, one of the greatest influences on my life. She has taught me a lot, both in terms of, traditional education, math, reading, English, but the bigger things, how to look at life, how to approach life, what to get out of life. And, she's no longer with us, but I think about her every day. And one of my goals is at some point in the future, I'd like to start a foundation, and I'd like to name that foundation after her. So that is the greatest influence on my life in terms of an educator.
Yeah, you're right. It's the informal educators that often have some of the biggest impact.
Yeah.
They wouldn't call themselves that, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's an important part of our journey. Right? None of us got to where we are alone, and that's a big one. Where did you grow up?
Oh, so I grew up in the Caribbean. I was born in Jamaica. I was born in a very small town. I believe there might have been about 500 people in the town that I grew up in. And I grew up with my grandmother. I have a very typical immigrant story. My mother left me when I was young to move to the United States to sort of, set the path and figure out how to get more of her family over. And as a result, I grew up with my grandmother. And then as a teenager, I moved to the US to live with my parents. And so I would say I identify as a Jamaican, but I also identify very much as an American from Brooklyn, New York, because that's where you find all the other Jamaicans that left Jamaica. They all end up somewhere in Brooklyn or Queens. So that's my story. Born in Jamaica, grew up there.
Yeah, that's a tough transition as a teenager.
It was a challenging transition, actually. I moved when I was about 13 years old. And at the time, I was in high school in Jamaica because the Jamaican education system starts a little bit earlier than the US educational system. But I moved into junior high school in Brooklyn when I moved there. So at the time, and it's just at the age where, you're sort of tall, and I was getting taller and I was gangly, and I had to learn the cultural norms of, New York City public high schools and junior high schools. And it was not easy, but it in very many ways has made me the person I am today. I'm a little tougher because of it, I would say, in that transition, for sure.
Well, so obviously you have a long history. You have a law degree. You've been an entrepreneur. You have a wide variety of education and experiences. Uh, Among your many successes, of what achievement are you most proud?
Wow, that's an interesting question. I'm a little bit older than I probably look, so I've been on the block a few times. So I've done some things, and I've achieved a few things that I'm very proud of. I would say, in terms of, you know, career accomplishments, I am very proud of starting this company. So, Torsh, which stands for Today's One Room Schoolhouse, is essentially the amalgamation of all the other experiences that I've gained. As you mentioned, I started out as a lawyer. I then left law, went into tech. And then in tech, I went into sales and business development. And then from there, I became an entrepreneur. But I started Torsh with the knowledge that I personally wanted to do something that would have an impact on the world while at the same time being able to make it financially successful. So I call it doing good while doing well. And so I'm proud of it because, most companies fail. So most entrepreneurial ventures fail within the first year.
Particularly in education. It's even higher in education,
It
right?
is higher in education.
Yeah,
I think it's probably equivalent to restaurants. So restaurants and education ventures don't last a lot of time,
that's
very
the
long.
truth. Yes.
So I would say somewhere in the range of 80 to 85% of new businesses fail within the first year. So we're going into our 13th year. So I'm very proud of the fact that we're able to get it off the ground, deliver something that people are willing to buy, and to be able to continue to drive towards a goal that is both interesting to me as a person and fulfilling for our employees. So I'm very proud of that. And so Torsh just to tell you what Torsh does, we are a professional coaching and professional learning platform. So we make it possible for schools and educators to train their teachers, leaders, administrators on how to become better at their job with the ultimate goal of improving student outcomes. That piece is really important, right? So even though we focus on helping educators get better at what they do, it's not just to get better at what they do. The ultimate goal, we believe, of educators and education leaders is to produce students that are great human beings that can graduate from school and get a job and become contributing members of society. So that is our ultimate goal. Everything we do must result in more children leaving school, being great citizens, and being able to contribute to their society. That's what I'm most proud of.
Absolutely. Well done too. I mean, you're right.
Thank
Starting
you.
an entrepreneurial enterprise in general is quite a heavy lift, and to do that in the education space, wow. I mean, 13 years. You've outlived the majority of those who started over the last
How long
decade.
have you been? How long have you been doing it? How long has your company been around?
So we started in 2009. So we're about 15 years, 16 years,
Yeah.
right? So very similar kind of pathway. And, it is something that requires a persistence in education, because it's always, and I get to coach a lot of ed tech companies out of like, ed tech startups. And it's interesting when I talk to them, they are so enamored with their product that they don't understand the market. They don't, because having been a school administrator, they don't understand the way they think and the way that they operate, and so their go to business, their go to market strategy is underestimating. My message to them is, you don't know what you don't know about your market. You've got to learn. You've got to listen. You're going to iterate on this 5 or 6 or 7 times before you even come close, right? And unless you're just happen to be lucky, but it's like 1 in 1,000. And so many of them go out of business, even though they've invested all this in education and other things. They don't, again, they're so in love with their product, they don't understand the market, right? And so that's an interesting.
So I think you deserve some kudos as well, having started in 2009. It's a long road. It's a rough road. So for you to still be here and doing the work that you do is certainly worthy of praise. So kudos to you as well.
That. Yeah, well, it's a journey for sure. Hey, so you mentioned today's one-room schoolhouse. Why? What's the relevance there? Because I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, we realized it was too long, so we're like, all right, let's just shorten it to Torsh. Today's one-room schoolhouse is a bit of a mouthful. So it started with the idea that we had around how we started the company. So where we started and where we are today are a little bit different. The vision for Torsh when we started was this notion of videotaping and recording every single classroom, uploading those videos to a piece of software that could look at where students were in their learning journey and be able to inform teachers about what they should do to intervene or to help that student along. My initial thought was, I think I overheard someone talking about the fact that their son or their nephew had to repeat a grade. And it just struck me. I mean, so this was like in 2011 when I had the idea. I was like, how is it in 2011 that someone has to repeat a grade? Should we not know at month 1, 2, 3, 4 that this child is not on the path? And so you could come up with these interventions. But as a non-educator, I was like, it seems logical to me. So the idea was, I was like, well, what if you could videotape the classroom? And so the next day you could show the teacher, here's what Johnny learned and here's what Johnny didn't learn. And so the software becomes a part of the classroom and makes it possible, just like Little House on the Prairie, the one-room schoolhouse, where you had children at different levels in the classroom, and maybe the older student would teach the youngest student, and the teacher could focus on the student that needed the most help. Software, today's one-room schoolhouse, software could enable us to create the same sort of one-room schoolhouse where in a given classroom, you could focus for the teacher. This is the student needs the most help. Those other kids are doing all right. So that was the vision. So today's one-room schoolhouse would be a schoolhouse that was significantly enhanced by software. And in fact, New York City was trying to do something interesting. School of One, I think it was called, in
Right. I remember
the
that.
early, where they
That's a
would
while
sort of
ago.
like capture. That was a while ago.
Yes.
They were capturing data, and then the next
Mhm.
morning, the teacher would come in with a big screen, and it would show each student and where they were. But the data was being captured from just like the computer. And I was like, well, what about video? So like if video was involved, you'd get far more data. So that was the vision until that vision hit into reality. So I'll tell you how we got to where we are today. My partner, who has a PhD in education, he introduced me to a couple of charter schools, and I went and I said, hey, here's this idea that I have. We're going to videotape the classrooms, and we're going to create this software that's going to give teachers very clear indications of which students are at what places. And I remember the administrator sat there looking at me very patiently, and they're like, I don't think that's a very good, I don't think he said it's not a good idea. It was interesting. We're not that interested in that. He goes, but here's what's interesting about what you're trying to do. We do have teachers that are using flip cams to videotape themselves and are giving each other feedback. But to get the video from the flip cam to a device where they can actually see it is a bit of a problem. So they're burning the videos onto CDs, and then they're sharing the CDs around. But by the time they get it, we're about a week or two from when they recorded the lesson. So he goes, if you could find a way, exactly, to videotape what's happening in the classroom, and by the very next day, the teachers can look at it and share with each other and give each other feedback, because that would be interesting to me. So I'm an entrepreneur. So in my mind, I'm like, for me to do what I want to do, I have to do that anyway, right? I have to capture the whole classroom and be able to get it into the cloud and be able to share quickly. So I'm like, I can absolutely do that. So I'm like, give me a couple of weeks. I'll come up with a product that can do that very simply. That's how we started, because that person then said, if you can do it for me, I will pay you to do it. So Friendship Charter School, Washington, D.C., was the person who said, this big idea you have, great, not that interested, but the smaller piece of it, which is allowing teachers to share, provide easy feedback, and help each other, that is really interesting and important.
Yeah. So that's that point about entrepreneurship, right? So many
Yes.
entrepreneurs, they're like, oh, I designed this for another purpose, and they're not listening to the feedback
They're
that
not
says,
listening.
yeah, but
That's right.
you got to monetize this thing, right? You've got to figure out how to solve a problem that they're having. And so we
Yes.
like to say you're answering the question they're asking versus the one they're not asking, right? They weren't asking the other question. Now, if you can solve
They
for
were
this one,
not.
right now, that's a game
Exactly.
changer, right? So that's beautiful. I love the example of that journey. I have a question for you though. As you
Mm-hmm.
began working with the idea of coaching, and the reason
Mm-hmm.
I use that word is coaching in education typically is not well received. I mean, overall, like if I tell you you're a teacher and I say, hey, Courtney, I'm going to put you on a coaching plan, right? That typically
Yes.
means that I'm having remedial sort of interaction with you. I'm saying, Courtney, you're not
Mm-hmm.
getting it done. And so I'm going to try to fix you, right? Versus in every other field in professional work, coaching is designed to shorten learning curves, right? To help give feedback loops and to help growth, right? And so have you bumped into some resistance around the idea of coaching?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a real question and something that we have to deal with on a daily basis. Before I answer that, I want to step back a little bit to
Yeah.
articulate that we didn't actually start out in coaching. We
Oh,
ended up
okay.
in coaching. We started
Ah,
out in feedback and reflection,
you backdoored it.
which is different. We backdoored it because we learned,
Right.
right? So
Yeah,
where we started
absolutely.
out was feedback and reflection. We've created an
Mm.
an app that
Yeah.
allowed a teacher to capture video and then either provided feedback to someone or received feedback
For
or
sure.
spent just to reflect on what did I do
I
yesterday.
gotcha.
And what kept happening was, so we did that. And then our customer said, well, we want to go one step further. So we want the principal to not only be able to give feedback, but to also set some goals, right?
Yep.
And so once the goals are set, they have
Yes.
some means at which to evaluate against how this person did against the goals. So we need some sort of rubric or framework. We did that. And then we got to the point where the organization said to us, we want to be proactive. We no longer want to be reactive. And to be
Sure.
proactive, we need to coach, right? So we need to establish where we want this teacher to go.
Yep.
We need to provide them with a guide, and we need to be able to, each step of the way, support where they need to be, remind them that they're doing well, and to be like, this is good. So that's how we got to coaching. Now, to your real question, even though that's how we got there, it's still an issue because you are correct. If this was sports, right? If we're in the sports business, every athlete who's making $1 million, 50 million, 100 million would be like, where's my coach? In fact, I want 4 coaches. I want my mental coach. I want my nutritional coach. I want my position coach. And I want my life coach, right? And I will pay boatloads of money to get this incremental increase in productivity or in the quality of my chosen profession. But we're not in sports. We're in education. And in education, you're 100% correct. Coaching is typically perceived as negative. It means I'm not good enough. And in fact, if all the great teachers were asking for coaches, it would be different. A lot of the times, the really strong teachers are kind of left on their own because they're strong. And the folks that we focus a lot of our time and energy on are the less strong who can improve but need help. And it's often seen in that lens where you're not doing so well, so you need this help. And so it's always some amount of friction. But it is changing. And I'll tell you one of the big things that I've seen in the last 2 or 3 years as we have moved more into the early education space. Coaching is no longer being seen as a means of improving challenging individuals. It is seen as a means of developing your workforce, a workforce that is critical and that we cannot actually solve the shortages that we see without a strong coaching and professional development infrastructure.
Now,
And
is
so
that
the
coming from
shift,
teachers or from the leadership?
leadership,
Okay.
this is coming from leadership
Okay.
generally.
All right.
And so just to clarify, even though coaching is seen in some ways as negative by the teacher, what the leadership has done is to reframe for that teacher why coaching is important. We believe in you. We think you're important. We need you. You are our critical component. We're providing you with this support, not because you are weak or you need help, but because we can't do this without you, and this is a resource for you. So that shift has come along with the recognition that there's a massive shortage at all levels of the qualified teachers that are needed to do the work. And you can either beat them over the head or you could say, well, what do you need?
Yeah, absolutely. Come along
Right?
beside, right? Provide the support
Precisely.
out of
What do
love,
you
right?
need?
Yeah,
And they're
absolutely.
hearing from a lot of these teachers,
Yeah.
we need more support. We need to know how to do what we're doing. We
Yes.
need life support. We just need somebody to talk to. This has nothing to do with what's going on in the classroom. I'm having a tough day at home. So coaching is shifting a little bit now from sort of a remedial focus to a I don't know what the right word is. It's almost sort of
Constructive.
like a part.
Yeah.
What did you say?
Yeah. Constructive, right?
It's a
It's
constructive, it's
enabling.
another tool along with your salary, along with your vacation,
Yeah.
along with all the things that we think are important for you to have as a professional. I now have a coach that can support you. That's a shift that we've seen. And the jury's still out as to whether or not the educators are open to this and whether or not they're going to perceive it differently and whether or not it's going to improve their lives and the lives of students. But it's an important shift because the financial resources are also being shifted to
I got you.
support
Yes.
that.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, it's almost like why shouldn't every educator have an IEP, right? Why? I mean, what's wrong with that? Where's the downside?
Yeah,
I'm investing in you. I'm helping you become your best. I believe in you. I'm here for you. It's that it does require leadership to have a certain
that's correct.
tone, right? And I would assume
Yes.
that your program at Torsh is more effective in an environment where you have that level of mature leadership that is investing in their people and is trying to provide the best conditions for educators to thrive.
100%. We cannot be successful without leaders who are visionary and who are willing to create the environment for their people to thrive and for coaching to thrive. One of the things you said earlier, why shouldn't every, educator have a coach, right? That is the basis on which we are moving forward in the future. I know this might not have been part of what you wanted to talk about, but this is where AI plays an incredibly important role, right? We have always said every teacher should have a coach, even if it's just a life coach, a friend coach, doesn't matter. Teaching is hard, right? Going to a classroom and dealing with 25 kids every day is really hard. And it would have been great. We've always thought about, wouldn't it be great if every teacher could have a coach? Until this AI boom, that was never really possible. And that's not to say that we're trying to replace humans. What we're saying is that we could 100% supplement the work that humans are doing now by giving them some assistance that they didn't previously have before. And so that's the win, that's the vision, that's the promise of AI, making it possible to have coaching interactions more frequently for those who need them.
Yeah. Well, and that becomes particularly important if you understand that the product of a school is more than likely not your students, it's actually your educators and the experience they create every day. Because in reality, I don't control for student outcomes, but I do control for the quality of my people and the culture in which I enable them to use their talents and their gifting to change lives. Right. And so I think what's powerful about that is if we think that way, if we understand that our job as education leaders is to build an incredible team of talented educators and then love them like they are, right? Provide the best conditions for them to thrive. Find ways, whether it's using technology, the AI pieces, other peer coaching, other feedback, external, coaching as well. Some combination of that to believe in them, to help them grow and become all they were created to be. That's an exciting vision that I think you guys get to contribute to.
For sure. And I'm I'm gonna disagree a little bit with you in one thing you
I
just
wanted you
said.
to.
Yeah.
Yes, a little
So
provocative for you.
yes, as a company that produces a product, the product that we produce is intended to support, develop, and enhance your teaching core. So if I'm coming to you as an administrator, I am going to be selling you something that is going to improve your, let's call it maybe your primary product, which is the quality of your teaching. At the same time, I think one of the challenges that we've dealt with in the United States, and it hasn't always been the case, but it has been in the recent past, is that there are too many educators who disaggregate what they produce from the results that they're intending to produce. And I guess I could be a little bit more clear there, which is there are too many teachers who do not see their product as a student who has learned XYZ and is capable of doing, you know, EFG, right? And I hear you when you say that I cannot control for that outcome, But if we are unwilling to hold our teaching staff accountable and our leaders accountable for pushing out of the door an 18-year-old that is basically fluent in reading, math, and language arts so that they could go get a job and produce taxes that support this country, then I think we've got
Good
a problem.
citizens. Yes, yes.
Good citizens. There
Yes,
has to be
yes.
some relationship
For sure.
between what it is you're doing as an adult in that room and the end result, which is the person that walks across the stage at 18 years old. There are a lot of other factors, and I'm aware of this. I have 3 children myself. There are a lot of factors, including the home, the parents, their colleagues, their peers, all that stuff. But at the end of the day, we want teachers who feel accountable for making sure that little Johnny can read, write, and can go get a job when he graduates at 18. And if we don't, that's a problem. I think there's been a bit of that. It's one of the bigger issues that we're dealing with in education in the United States. I don't know that that's the case elsewhere,
Interesting.
but it is a challenge.
Yeah, for sure. So you've obviously been, as we said earlier, you've been in this education space and the entrepreneurship as well. There are people who are teachers or other roles now that they're maybe considering taking a chance on an entrepreneurial endeavor. And so especially now, like a lot of the technology, it's never been easier to start a new school. We're seeing that happen, especially in states with a very aggressive approach to choice options, right? So what's the best advice you would give educators who may be considering taking a chance as an entrepreneur?
So I would give this advice to anyone wanting to become an entrepreneur. And then I could sort of make it a little more specific to education, because you and I both in a space for specific reasons. But the general advice I would give is that I think we have romanticized the notion of entrepreneurship. And I think tech is a big part of that. So there's this notion of some kid who quits college at 19 and goes and starts a company, and in 5 years he's worth billions and billions of dollars. So there's this notion that most entrepreneurs look like that, but it is not true. The average entrepreneur in the United States is in his or her 40s, and the average entrepreneur is actually building a business that is focused on some piece of knowledge that he or she has that they're taking from an existing job. Right? It's sort of like the better mousetrap theory. That's what most entrepreneurship actually looks like. It's not actually Facebook. So we have this notion, because it's just sexy to think about these young kids who just goes and make posts. But most times it's some person who was working at a company. I was like, we could do this little thing better. So I'm going to go start a company and I'm going to go do this little thing better. And a lot of times their existing employer becomes a customer, because they have figured out how to do that little thing better. And they will go back to their employer and they goes, I can help you do this little thing better. So now let's take to the education context, because I like that notion for education. If you're an educator and you have an entrepreneurial idea, it would be great if that idea is a function of the work that you've been doing and you're passionate about solving a thing or a problem that you have encountered in your job as an educator, right? If you can focus on that thing that you've been doing for 15 to 20 years, so first of all, it makes it actually easier to get funding, because as a funder, I'm going to be like, what do you know about this problem? Well, I'm glad you asked, right? I've been in the classroom for 20 years. And in those 20 years, I've seen this specific issue that has never been solved well. I have an idea. Whether or not that idea is going to work is an entirely different question, but I've at least articulated my expertise for why I want to do this. That's the first thing. The second piece is, as educators, I don't think most people don't become educators because they want to be rich. They become educators because they have a level of empathy and the desire in many cases to make the world a better world. And what better way to do that than to take young minds that are, open and are ready to be molded and mold them into the citizens we want them to become. So I would say to education entrepreneurs, lean into that sort of empathy, lean into something that will actually make the world a better place. And to the extent that you can make it even more specific to the job they've been doing, that's great. Educators are highly empathetic people in large part. Continue to do that and just shift the space. You're no longer in the classroom. You're now running a business. If those things can stay consistent, you can do wonderful things. That's the
That's
advice I
awesome.
give
Yeah,
them.
I love that. I think
Find
you're
something
spot
that
on.
that's broken and fix it.
Yep.
Continue to think about the big picture of how to make this world a better place.
Yep.
And the two together should create something wonderful.
That makes sense. Good advice. Well said, Courtney. Hey, so
I hope
from your
somebody listens to me.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's passed along. So from your perspective, we've got a lot of things we could solve in education, but what's the biggest challenge? What's the biggest challenge that needs to be solved ASAP, particularly in the United States?
There are so many, Scott. I thought, I think about this often because we think about what is our impact, right? In 20, 30 years, when I look back and we've been running this business, what did we do? What did we achieve? What is our goal? Of all the things that I could think about, I would say that one of the biggest challenges right now, I'm going to give you two. You only asked one, but I'll give you two. The first is, everybody is aware of it, is that for whatever reason, our population seems to be becoming less and less literate, right? Less and less literate in terms of reading and math, computational competencies. That is shocking. We're the richest country in the world, right? We have a massive economy that needs to be supported by kids graduating and supporting this economy. How is it possible that in 2025, we're doing worse and worse on these standardized exams? That is if I was a space alien coming into the country from outer space, I'm like, let me look at your report card as a country. I would look at that and be like, you are absolutely failing. That's a problem. And it's across the country in lots of states. We obviously have the high performing states who consistently do better. You take those out of the mix, even within their communities, they're having challenges. When you take those out of the mix as a country, we're not doing well. That's
you and I
one.
live in the southeastern U.S., and that's a particular, we're kind of the drag on the rest of the country. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we might be getting some politics here, but yes, 100%. You cut off the East and the West.
Yeah, it's a whole different deal.
And the numbers look particularly bad. Mm-hmm. And we are the richest country in the world. We might not be for much longer, but currently we are.
Yes.
It doesn't make sense, right? The second issue, which I think is probably going to be more relevant for, higher performance, is who are we graduating in terms of our students over the next 10 to 15 years? In other words, what are we preparing those students for? Right? Like the world in which they're going to be graduating into, there's AI, there's massive financial disruptions. The world is changing. If I'm a superintendent, maybe even just as a principal of a high school now, like, what am I preparing these kids for? What do they need to learn? At what level do they need to learn it? What jobs are they going to have? How are they looking at themselves as citizens? How are they perceiving this country? Like, it's just, I can't even comprehend it. In 1950, you know what you were doing. You're like, you're going to go down the street and work at Ford. You'll be all right. I'm going to give you these basic skills. I'm going to push you out the door. You'll go get a job. You'll get married. You'll have a decent life. All of that has been eroded, but it's particularly relevant right now when we're at the precipice of one of the greatest technological breakthroughs and disruptors ever. So in 10 years, what are your students doing? What are they learning? What do they need to learn? Who are they? We're also dealing with these massive social disruptions where our children are more comfortable speaking to devices than they are speaking to each other. I have a small anecdote. I have an 11-year-old son, and he finally got a girlfriend. He's super excited. He's got a girlfriend, right? I don't know what that actually means, but they text each other all the time. So I took him to the Lego store a couple months ago to get him some Legos. And as we're walking into the store, he goes, "That's my girlfriend over there." I'm like, "Where?" And he points to him, like, "Let's go say hi to her." He goes, "No, I don't talk to her." I'm like, "Why don't you want to talk to her?" I was like, "I don't." So we go into the store, and he takes out his phone and he texts her. And she texts him back. She goes, "I saw you." They both saw each other,
but
but
no
had no
human
interest in
interaction.
speaking to each other at all. Little microcosm, but I mean, you blow that up, and we have these massive disruptions where
For sure.
we're as educators, we deal with human beings. That is our core function. We educate humans, and we're in this space where humans are not being very human. They're not interacting with each other. Social interaction is a core function of being human. So as a principal, as a superintendent, where I've got these kids from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., right? Every day or 5 days a week. What am I producing? What am I teaching my leaders, my educators to do? I can't fathom it. And whatever we're doing, it's probably not the right things, because these conversations are not happening at a larger scale where
exactly
we got to make these changes. So those are two things that I think about when I think about the big issues right now in education.
And
there's so
are
many
huge.
more, as I'm sure you know.
Yeah, when it comes to school improvement planning or strategic planning, whatever you call it, right? The idea of what schools should look like and what does it mean to go to school, it's because of these advances that you're talking about, it does change nearly every aspect of the way schools are designed and led and structured. So it's it used to be that we had a pretty good map, right? We knew that if you wanted to grow a middle school, urban, rural, or different characteristics, you could kind of switch out the map and you kind of had a pretty good idea of what it should look like. We don't even know what that should look like, physical arrangement of a school, right? Much less, I went to a high school. This is a weird kind of flashback, right? But I went to a high school in the late 1970s that had no walls. Right. It was built on a concept from the 1960s of the open school format. And you could walk through 8 classrooms and never touch a doorknob. Okay.
Oh, wow.
And so this was in Columbia, South Carolina, Spring Valley High School, and big high school, a couple thousand kids at public high school. And the autonomy that we had in terms of how we used time and how we scheduled other things, it was phenomenal. I mean, the kids today, very few high schools, even the ones that I led, if I could go back, I would, that's one thing I would change. Right. But there was, in terms of as an administrator, but it was amazing how we did have such a high degree of autonomy. And I think that some of the same things that we learned, we've tried out over periods of time. By the way, they built walls at that school eventually, not because of the kids, because of the adults, because the educators couldn't handle it. Right? The students who went to that school will still speak about how much they really just love the experience of the whole thing. Right? So I think that there is some sort of back to the future element to some of the things we're going into, but. To your point, we're going to have schools now. There was a book Peter Singer wrote many years ago, like I think about the time of Good to Great, kind of came out, where he talked about the learning organization. It was the 5th discipline, and the idea was that the single most sustainable strategic advantage is to learn faster and more effectively than your competitors, right? And I think today there has to be a commitment from school leaders for us to be a learning organization, a healthy learning organization. We don't know what we don't know about what, like you mentioned, 10 years out. We don't even know 5 years out at this point. Things are changing so rapidly that, my personal view is that the school of, say, 2030 is going to look more like the library of 1985. right? When you walked into a library in 1985, you didn't walk in and they said, okay, Courtney, go sit over there for 45 minutes. Go sit over there for 45 minutes. The librarian would say, Courtney, what do you want to learn? Oh, you want to learn that? Well, then I can take you over here to the reference section, or let's go over here to fiction. Oh, you want to read for entertainment? Okay, let's go over here to fiction or other things, right? I can take you where you want to go, but you have to bring an interest and an attitude and an aptitude to the table, right? So I'm not here just to give you a curriculum. I'm here to facilitate your learning. And I suspect that's probably going to be more of what the school experience is, especially as students get a little bit older, is having more sort of, again, that idea that Daniel Pink talked about in the book Drive, autonomy, mastery, and purpose, right? I think that's going to be probably a part of it. But the really interesting thing, and I'll close on this, is we used to say that we're preparing kindergartners for jobs that don't exist today, right? I mean, that was sort of the mantra of, things have changed. Now we're preparing parents for jobs that don't exist today. Right. And that's a significant shift as we're looking at schools not only making an impact on younger aged students, but recognizing that the role of schools and communities is probably going to also participate in how do we re-engineer family knowledge and ability to earn a living and to contribute to society and to grow as citizens, right? It's a pretty significant shift in the perspective of how we impact our communities, but I suspect that's going to be a growing emphasis for school leadership, is how do we expand beyond just the younger students?
Wow. I hadn't really thought much about that. I do recall that there are some charter schools in New York City that, as part of their mission, they were much more community focused. So in order to support their students, they sort of opened their doors to the community and to the parents and to creating spaces for those parents to be within the school.
Sure.
But I hadn't thought seriously about the role of schools in helping the parents find opportunities and become better educated. It makes sense. One of the words that you used earlier, which I really like, and which I think is going to be such an important part of how education is done, is facilitate. So moving from the role of this director or this instructor,
right,
to give you knowledge. And I come from probably the most traditional, construct ever, the old British system of rote learning and you learn this, to what I think is going to be the healthier and the more logical way to train is to facilitate. Here are all the things you can do. Here are all the ways you can do them. I'd like to help you figure out the best way, and I'll facilitate your inclination and your aptitudes at this particular moment. And I can guide you and move you along, but it's going to be in a lot of ways self-directed. I'd mentioned earlier that we've moved more into the early education space, where obviously at that age, when you're dealing with young kids, they don't have as much opportunity to direct their own learning. But I will say that I have seen some environments in which autonomy is being introduced and encouraged at earlier stages as well. And I think that as a parent, one of the greatest things you can do for your children is to facilitate and support their autonomy. Our parents did it, but in the old-fashioned way, right? They didn't have that language. They weren't like, Courtney and Scott, we're going to facilitate your autonomy. They're like, get the hell out of the house and don't come back until dinner time.
Right.
So then you had to figure out what to do. And I think that there's been a difference in parenting, but I think that's where we're going to end up again. You have to start figuring out how to help your children learn how to do more things faster.
That's right.
Particularly in a world where change has sped up and things are moving much more quickly.
And there has to be a willingness to not to hold dependence. Right. I mean, that's the idea, is instead of me trying to hang on to you to make you dependent on me, I want you to be able to, spread your wings and go. Right.
That's right.
And you got to take some chances, and you got to go and take some, deal with some hard things, and you got to fight your way through it, because you learn so many emotional, spiritual, physical, intellectual muscles through that journey. Right. And so you're right. I think that's
for sure.
For sure.
For sure. And, you're gonna fall sometimes. I'll be here to catch you.
That's right.
But you do need to fall, and you don't
Mhm.
want them to, you don't want to have them too early, right? I think from in terms of like development, you don't want them to have too many falls too early, but you need to find that
For
right
sure.
time where they're starting to fall and they're getting
Yeah.
up and getting
Yep.
back on the bike and moving forward.
No, I'm with
So
you. Well, Courtney, thanks for all that you do. If you want to know more about Courtney's work, Torsh it's Torsh. Yep, and that's
sh.co.
.co, right?
Yes,
And so they've
that's
got
correct.
fantastic system. So if you're a school administrator or teacher in any role there, check out what Torch has got going on. It's a fantastic platform. It has a lot of different ways of using it in terms of the development, professional development, coaching, and development of the entire leadership program of a school. So really encourage you to check that out. Courtney, thank you again for all that you do, for the encouragement you provide for educators, being a blessing in the lives of so many people. You make a big difference, and I'm very thankful for our work together and look forward to continuing the conversation with you.
Well, thank you, Scott. I appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts and to speak with you on this platform that you've built. I think you're doing some great work. We tend to focus on the teachers, you focus on the leaders, but both of us together, the work that we're
That's right.
doing is important.
Absolutely.
And thank you for your service as well. And I appreciate the relationship that we've built over the years. So thank you again.
Absolutely. Love of my leader, my friend. And this is Scott.
Thank you for joining us for the Educators Among Us podcast and for your courageous commitment to this noble calling. We get you and the challenges of this work. To stay connected with this community, be sure to subscribe to our podcast and weekly encouragement at educatorsamongus.com.